Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to our presentation today. I'm Lisa Chapman, class of 81, MBA, Yale School of Management, and founder and president of First Gen Yale, which is now almost 10 years old, a support group to help first generation and or low income students. We have around 5,200 alumni who have been to one of our events and during our time. And we currently have about 600 or 700 students who are in our database. And then they become alumni and we have more students. So thank you for signing up. You will all be part of our database. We have events all the time, year round. And I'm really excited to be here today. I want to thank our hosts who are Dwight Hall. Thank you, Edward. That's fine. Dwight Hall, and thank you for Edward for hosting this and our wonderful lunch today. Lydia Burleson, who's sitting next to me, class of 21. This was her idea. She and Xavier were coming to town and thought it'd be a fun idea, and we love ideas like this. So it was great to put together with fellow alumni. And as you know, we're going to be taping it today. Thank you for doing that. Our program is going to run an hour. We're going to spend about 30 minutes on the panelists introducing themselves, talking about their journeys, talking about why they have PhDs. What's wonderful about this panel is it's a broad group from Kevin Chan on our end, class of 24, who just has applied and has been admitted to Boston University in data science. So he's the closest in age to you all, graduated in 24, 2 years ago. And he can talk to you about what it's like today, why he went today. Next is Sam Sadami, class of 84, and a PhD from the University of Rochester, who's had a very broad career in chemical work as well as beyond, working as a consultant for McKinsey and now running a startup. And next is Xavier, who is a class of 22 PhD from Yale in MCDB. I get them confused, thank you. Who's doing a postdoc in genetics at Harvard. So he's also fairly recent and now in another journey of where he is after his time at Yale at getting his PhD. And Lydia Burleson sitting next to me, class of 21, who's at Stanford as a Knight Scholar Fellow, and will share her journey. And she's getting her PhD in English. So you have a combination of the science, the tech, and humanities all together. So I'm going to now turn it over to Lydia to introduce herself more than what I had just presented, and we'll go down the panel and we'll open up the first question. And we're going to have a Q&A after the first 25 minutes, so save your questions for that, and then we'll have the rest of the afternoon for 30 minutes to review that. Lydia.
Well, thank you all for coming. I'm Lydia, she, her pronouns. Graduated from Yale in 21 with a degree in English. And was in JE actually, so I'm doing my PhD at Stanford in English. I'm looking at American literature, specifically the representations of race and poverty as they in the 1930s. So my work is primarily in English, but I also do some stuff in American studies, global media studies, history. But I'm kind of the person on the panel to talk about the humanities side of things. And so I wish I had someone when I was an undergrad here to give me some advice on some things that I could do at Yale that would increase my chances of being competitive at a PhD program. So I'm happy to talk about what my process was like. I applied to PhD programs twice, and I took a year in between Yale and Stanford actually working at Dwight Hall. So I can also talk about like the choices that went into that, what it was like applying as a senior and what it was like applying again and how my application changed. So really wanting to get it all like hands-on into this stuff.
Awesome. I'm Javi, Blessing Portillo, and thank you all for being here and thank you for organizing this. I am first gen low income from Los Angeles, California. Very low income, very first gen. A lot of hidden curriculum to reveal throughout the entire journey, and happy to talk about that. I currently work at Harvard and MIT. I'm in between postdoc and professorship, so I have undergraduates who work with me. I have graduate students that work with me, and I do directed evolution of RNA and machine learning. And I think something that Lydia said about the humanities, I feel like I got a really wonderful experience here at Yale, where the humanities is so good that it bleeds into the sciences, the writing, the mentorship. You see it in MCDB and also in other types of the sciences here at Yale. And I feel very fortunate to have that experience. So I'm very happy to talk to you all about that process. I'll be applying to tenure track professorships within a year or two. I'm so also happy to talk about what that looks like, the journey from first gen to applying for professorships.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Dan?
Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Sumdani. I just want to, first of all, thank everyone for coming. And hopefully, at the end of our introduction, you get to ask us questions as to what would be most helpful to you as you think about a new PhD. But I was born and brought up in Bangladesh, of all places. So if I were to describe myself, I'm probably the one who has crossed many boundaries and borders and also embraced a lot of contradictions. So I am someone who came from Bangladesh and ended up here in 1980 and thinking about what a place to be and learn about a lot of different things. So, and that changed my life ever since. After Yale, I went to University of Rochester for my PhD in chemical engineering. And then instead of going into academia or traditional industry track, I actually wanted to publish it. I was an editor for a journal called Chemical Engineering and did that for 5 years, having fun. And then a headhunter called saying, hey, you are doing some interesting things. A firm called McKinsey would be interested in someone like you. I said, who is McKinsey? I never heard of McKinsey. And that headhunter helped me with the preparation as to how we prepare the interviews and the like. The lesson I learned was do good work, whatever you do, and sometimes opportunities find you. In my case, I'll probably share with you, even today, I spent a lot of time. I moved back to New Haven 4 years ago after living in different parts of New Jersey, 30 plus years. And I just want to connect students to opportunities, the ones that are looking for interesting things to do. And as I said, crossing boundaries and embracing contradictions. A person who spent his life at McKinsey now talking about Yale students thinking about startups. So that is the contradiction I'm trying to embrace here at Yale. We'd love to talk about how people do different things after do their PhD and after their life at Yale. Looking forward to it.
Kevin, thank you. Kevin?
Hi everyone, I'm Kevin. Thank you all for being here. I was class of 2024. I majored in statistics and data science with a certificate in French. And after graduation, I worked for 2 years as a market researcher to primarily get industry experience and then also kind of create a financial safety net for myself and my family. And then after doing that, I decided that it was the right time to apply for a PhD. I was really interested in research as an undergrad. Didn't exactly know what kind of research I was interested in per se. I did some work in public health and climate, but then while working in industry, I also worked with a postdoc outside my 9 to 5, did a little bit of research with him, found my interest was in machine learning based climate and weather modeling. And so I applied to PhD programs in that. I got into Boston University, and that is where I'll be going in the fall.
Congratulations. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, all your panelists. Okay, why a PhD? What inspired you, and how did you go from your undergraduate experience or your job experience into applying to a PhD program?
I can kick it off. So I stayed in the same fields. I did English at Yale, and then I'm doing English PhD now. I think I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. Like that was kind of late since I was a kid. I was like, I want to teach people. And then being first gen, I had never known anyone who even had like college degrees aside from teachers. So then coming to Yale and seeing that I could teach even at the college level and what it would take to do that as a PhD. And then when I was going to make my application senior year, I looked back at all the English classes I had taken, and I saw that unintentionally that I was continually writing about the same thing. So I was really interested in this intersection of identity and marginalization, how things were becoming visible in text. And so a PhD is like a continuation of the kind of work that you're doing in your classes in your major now, but you are directing the work that you do. So like I went into my PhD with a research interest, which was looking at this intersection of race and poverty and thinking about how representability comes into play and how that shapes people's understanding of people from disadvantaged backgrounds. And so I went into the PhD knowing that. And then I also had this time in between the PhD where I was working a 9 to 5 and exploring what that looked like for me. And that happened here at Dwight Hall. And it was great. And I decided that I think I wanted to try to stay in the more academic side of things, which is a different day to day. Like it is not a 9 to 5. Right now I have no one telling me what to do, which is a very privileged thing to be paid. That's another difference between a PhD and a master's program. And at Stanford, they pay us $60,000. So like I have the security from the PhD, and then I have the privilege to read and to write and to think, and yeah, to have the freedom to continue exploring those ideas and to position myself as an expert on the thing that I want to research and ultimately teach at the academic level. So different from Sam, but I do want to stay in academia.
Xavier, thank you.
So I've always loved academia. I love the ways that it's broken, and it is broken, and it was never designed for people like this. It was never designed for people who are low income, and you could feel it. You could feel it in the classes. Oh yeah, it was not designed for low income folks. And I have always been enamored with it, and I love all the ways in which I can be a force for at least the students that I'm mentoring and the students that I'm working with to show them that there is a path to repairing academia for what it's supposed to be. And I can talk more about what it's supposed to be. I have an anecdote about the founding of Cambridge University in the UK, one of the oldest universities, where in their original charter, there was a proclamation on there that 80 students, which was a good percentage of the total population of the students, were to always come from the proletariat. So they were always supposed to have space for us, first gen low income. And we know how capitalism works. It's always just taking from first gen low income. And so I work really hard to have these difficult conversations with my students about how the system is not serving us and what we can do to make it work for us. So I love academia, and I'm ready to dedicate the rest of my life to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, in my case, as a barefoot farm boy growing up in Bangladesh, when I saw that title after people's name, PhD, I thought it looked funny. And vowel is missing, either feed, fat, or fod. But then later I learned it is the highest degree you can get in a discipline. And so when I was at Yale, I never thought twice about not getting a PhD, because my family also is very much pro-education, and they sent me over here to Yale thinking that I would get the highest degree. So the push from home was that you will continue. Now, on what area and where, that's what Yale showed me, what area that I wanted to focus on. So for me, actually, I followed pretty much the intellectual tradition of you do your undergraduate and do your PhD. And in my case, I of course had to think about the financial part of it, because if I worked, I could earn some more money and send money back home, which I did when I was a student here. I used to work part-time during that time. And the choice came, which university do you go to? And the choice for me was the one that paid me the highest, so that I could send more money home. So the lesson learned for me was you can manage the financial side if you think hopefully more creatively, and sometimes you have to present your case in a way that universities would be after you and offer you that opportunity, including the financial package. So I was able to do that. For me, it was not a huge sacrifice on the financial side either. But back in those days, I'm talking about the mid-1980s, it was not super expensive. And in science and engineering, pretty much everybody would get paid because you do the research and teaching and they will pay you. In humanities and other areas probably was not always the case, even back then. I don't know how it is now. It's probably still the case that in science and engineering, they will probably offer you some financial package. We can talk about that as to which universities do it and others. But in science and engineering, that is a privilege that we had most of the time, that we can count on the universities for financial support.
I think for me, like I said, I really enjoyed doing research as an undergrad. I enjoyed getting to read papers, figuring out that there was this cool model, and somehow thinking about ways to implement it. I didn't know exactly what the topic I was interested in was, so I went into industry for a little bit. And while working with a postdoc, I was reading some papers outside of our initial projects, and I found climate and weather modeling really interesting. And that at the same time, I knew that I wanted to become a research scientist in industry. And you can't really do that unless you have a PhD. So very much like I view the PhD as a means to an end, but you have to be aware that it's 5 years of your life, right? So it's also an intellectual journey. And so with kind of keeping both of those in mind, I looked at what I do now, market research, realized that I wasn't quite happy with like doing that sort of work in industry, just like plugging and chugging, calculating percentages, not super interesting. And I realized that pursuing a PhD would allow me to do the work that actually interested me. Even though it would be like a substantial pay cut, I think to me, it would make me a lot happier. So that was kind of my motivation for pursuing a PhD.
I guess that's one difference with a humanities PhD. My job out of undergrad was also paying me $60,000. So it was the same.
Wow, okay, so maybe let's jump to the application process. What was it like looking back, or recently, or long ago? How did you address, if you did it all, your first-gen low-income identity? How did you address that or not, and how do you feel about that? And what other considerations did you go through to actually go through the application process in terms of people you talked with, things you read? What helped you develop your application directly for the institution to apply to?
Since I did my application a long time ago, so I will start back then, no internet, so we used to go to the Office of Career Strategy, around as well. Basically followed the application process as described by university as to what you have to do. What I do remember though is making your case. Back then, your FGLI status was not something that people even talked about, that identity, that language didn't exist. But now I see that what I do hear from Yale faculty members when they do get their students, particularly graduate students, I've heard stories about the FGLI status. They do look at your story. What is the trajectory that you have taken from where you started? So that becomes part of your narrative, which was not the case. I didn't mention that, I grew up in Bangladesh, but they probably figured it out because of my name and so forth. But it was pretty much all academic merit and what area you're interested in, and connecting with the programs. A particular professor, if you know, that always helped. Even today, I can tell you anecdotally, if you mention a professor's name in your application and that professor finds out or figures out that you're interested in his or her work, and her story, they will lobby for you if they're convinced that you are the right person they want to get. So I always tell students, find a professor that you're passionate about, because I will emphasize the role of the advisor. That person determines your future when you're a at the school. Institution is fine, the brand is there, but it is so important to get the right advisor. So if you can identify a person you want to work with, either written a brilliant book, written a brilliant paper that you were fond of, that really would be the thing that I would emphasize based on my experience. Today, FGLI status, you should definitely put that as part of your, what questions are you asking, or problem you're trying to solve, and how does it relate to your FGLI status, or whatever background that you bring to this. I think that should be part of your story. That would be my pitch today.
Kevin, you're the most recent applicant. How did you approach it?
Yeah, I really agree a lot with what Sam said. It wasn't a huge part of my application. I mainly talked about it in the lens of, I'm interested in being a scientist who also mentors FGLI students rather than I am FGLI. It was a lot more, here are the different research experiences that I've had. Here's why they're relevant to your program. And these are the people who I would be interested in working with at your institution. And I think that kind of hitting on the hidden curriculum that Javi was alluding to, you really want to have a clear idea of which professors at each university you would be interested in working with. Because if you identify them and you reach out to them before you apply, you can figure out, one, whether or not they're accepting students, because they might not always have the funding to afford PhD students, and then two, whether or not you would be a good fit for their lab. And so in addition to contacting professors, I also contacted PhD students and postdocs that they worked with. And so I was just trying to talk to them what should I know when approaching the application for Boston University? What should I know as if I want to be a PhD student? So there's a lot of networking that you can do that honestly really makes your chances. And I will say that a big part of why I think the professor that I'm going to be working with at BU liked me was because I talked to two members of her lab before I even had an interview with her.
Excellent, thank you. Lydia, is your next chronologically, because being in the program, how you got in that program and what was your process like?
One big piece of advice is that, especially for the humanities, is potentially less clear, how much of it should be about you versus how much it should be about your work. And one difference I think between the first time I applied and the second, the personal statement primarily should be about the research you want to do at the university. I was on the admissions committee at Stanford last year, and so I can tell you that it is helpful to reach out and to put in your application which faculty you think you could potentially work with, because then they are looking at that as do we actually have the talk to people PhD students who get advice from them on how they got to the place that you want to be. And I'm also happy to talk further after this conversation if anyone wants more specific advice. I also applied concurrently if anyone is also thinking about fellowships. I applied concurrently to the Knight Fellowship at Stanford, which I didn't need in the way that someone going to med school or law school would need, because the PhD is funded, but having external funding, if you know how you did in that set, which is a big science one, that increases your chances of getting into a program, especially right now, because funding is so kind of up in the air. We can talk more about that. Because then Knight Hennessy told the English department that they were going to fund me, which increased my chances. And might have been the reason why I got an offer, because the English had an additional spot that they could give that didn't come out of their budget. And then the only other thing I'll say is don't take it personally for them. I applied as a senior from Yale, rejected it by school. And I had to do some thinking about what happened for me and my trajectory as a scholar and as a person. And the type of person that I wanted to be in a PhD program, how my Christian identity and accepted with my work, and how that would show up in my next then I got in the second time at the same place as rejected me the first time. So like,
There you go.
and depending on the context, like my department will accept 5, 6, you get 200 applications, so that's 50% acceptance rate. Or sometimes they're even more restricted than Yale. So sometimes it's not easy. Like, especially right now, with my climate.
It's really great advice. Great advice. Xavier,
So-
and for your MCDB and how you went through that process here at Yale.
So my experience is more like Kevin's, and I'm glad that Kevin covered the most important parts of it already. So everything that Kevin said, that's the most important part. But one thing that I got some good advice from a good mentor of mine for the PhD application, and it was the whole package needs to be very cohesive. So what that means is that if you're saying that you're collaborative, or you're saying that you're a hard worker, like there needs to be some attestation from a letter writer, and you can control what's in your letters of credit. I think people don't really understand or tell you. Like you should talk to your advisors and your mentors and say, hey, here's an outline of kind of what I'm talking about in my personal statement. Can you attest literally bullet point this, and this? And I tell my students to give me those bullet points and say, and I tell my students to give me that list. It makes my job easier when I write the letter because I know exactly what they're writing about in their personal statement. I'm not reading their personal statement, but if they want to be accurate to a good application package, they're going to verify all the things that are said in their personal statement. And this, I did 30% of my background, so my first gen low income identity was 30% of my personal statement. And that's relevant because someone on the admissions board or even professors who understand FGLI and the power of FGLI students understand the resilience that we are forced to have, the resourcefulness that we're forced to be. They can see that also. And so I didn't shy away from talking about that. And the other 70% was very much me saying, hey, I'm collaborative. But at the time, I was already building a web of professors at Yale for collaborative projects. So I was already talking to several professors, some of which who were in the admissions committee themselves. And so things that I was saying in my personal statement, there were CD line items from fellowships or previous grants that I have gotten that attest to the things that I'm saying. So anything that you say in your personal statement, make sure that it's validated by someone who's recommending you or a CD line item so that it's a cohesive message that you're sending. And the last thing I'll say is that, like Lydia was saying, that sometimes we are looking for some very specific type of researcher or some very specific focus, and that's your responsibility to do research on the faculty or the department at the time, talk to students in the labs, talk to postdocs in the labs that are in the department that you want to be in, find out what they're currently interested in, because the people who are evaluating your application are the professors, and of course they're going to be self-interested and try to recruit students who would be a good fit. So just make sure you do that research. Don't just apply because of the name of the school or whatever. Apply to the department because they're doing something that you really want to do.
That's really great advice. This is our last question before we're opening it up to everyone. So think of the kind of questions you want to ask any of our panelists. But Lydia, you talked about a very important challenge we all have, which are the challenges we face. And you talked about the challenge of having applied and not being admitted and then reapplying and getting admitted, which is a really hard, very difficult and upsetting situation that we went through and obviously ended up well and successful. And you didn't give up. And that's part of the sign of strength of first-gen low-income students and alumni is that we have the gift of grit, resilience, and hard work, and the gift of never giving up. So you all personified that very, very much. Can you all talk about challenges you faced in addition to what you talked about and shared, but other challenges you found in the process, kind of stop signs along the way, ways that you felt maybe it wasn't right for you, maybe you shouldn't continue, and how do you break through those barriers that you found particularly in the PhD thought process and the application process?
I can start. I think the primary challenge for me is financial because I don't have any kind of like financial safety net. or like family to fall back on if I needed to have a job the entire year period. And that was just how it was, and that definitely like shaped like the fact that I decided to do a PhD instead of looking at like an MFA or something else, because a PhD is paid and an MFA is not. It also meant that I was only looking at certain kinds of skills because, like Sam was mentioning, Stanford is unique in that they pay all grad students the same amount. Not all universities are like that, including Yale. Yale pays their STEM PhD students more, and some universities will pay STEM PhD students a lot more to get them to come, just because there's a more like clear trajectory from PhD to industry that we've heard about a little bit. I also think that for me, the humanities in particular, and this is partly why I feel so passionate about it, making it easier for Christian people to get into the humanities PhDs. The two most inaccessible PhD programs are humanities and econ. So those are the two, according to like data that they've been collecting for decades. So those are two programs where 80% of people who have a PhD in the humanities have a parent with at least one graduate degree. So both parents are educated and mom also has a graduate degree. And so you're entering into a space of the humanities that has like historically, especially in the past like, few centuries, been something that only people have money to do, and something that only people who have like the resources get to think about art or literature or what have you. So financial is like a big one. And I think the way that I kind of reframe that is like, yes, it was very expensive to like do a PhD in the sense of like moving from New England to California. I chose a university that was very well resourced and that has a lot of pockets of money that I'm very good at giving, as I'm sure you all know how to do here. And it also is something that like I try to reframe the fact that I have this identity as a positive thing, so as something that when I enter into a humanities conference or a room like a classroom or whatever, I might be the only person who knows what it's like for 90% of this country, in terms of like what it means to live paycheck to paycheck, or to not only know places like Yale. And so it is important for me and a strength of mine that I can bring that perspective, and that perspective informs my work. So it is balancing, like, yes, like obviously there are things that make it difficult to get into PhD programs because of all of the structural inequities that I'm sure you're familiar with in your own experience. But once you get there, like, you are so valuable, and like stepping into the power of that value, recognizing that like it's the system, it's not that there aren't more people like that, and that like you need to be doing this work to get more people into those spaces, that we have more diverse like scholarship happening, especially right now. Right, that's my first one.
So challenges.
You guys speak up to it. And by the way, help yourself for food. Anybody who has any food, please feel free to get up and get some pizza and salad.
Racism that we step away, especially at Yale, and still seeing it at Harvard. And these folks will never admit or think that they are racist. What it actually is just laziness, and I'm seeing this for what it actually is for the first time in my life. Is that they'll say things like, your job was easier 20, 30 years ago when everybody looked the same, and everybody thought the same, and everyone probably felt the same. And they don't want to lift an extra finger to put in the hard work to understand that we come from different backgrounds and we have different challenges. And that's what it looks like where the rubber meets the road. That's what the systemic issues are, where people are saying that their jobs are much harder now. And my response to that is to get out. You're embarrassing yourself. People see you being lazy. And this is paying professors here at Yale currently. and also at Harvard. And it's like, people see what you're doing. People see that you're just broadening these positions. You're inhibiting someone from coming in to do the hard work, who's willing to mentor someone who's different from them, who can mentor someone who has a different faith, a different gender identity, or anything that's different from theirs, but they don't want to do it. They have tenure and they're just kind of sitting on these positions and they're rotting away. And that's the biggest challenge. And it still continues to this day.
Sam and Kevin, can
Yeah.
you open up the
Yeah, sure. For me, the challenge is
What you embrace when you sign up to do PhD, because the problem you're going to select or elect to do may or may not work out, or in the end may not be solvable, which means you have to be agile. Okay, this is not the right problem at this time with the technology or the technical capability that you have. Be able to change, adapt. So I would say in my case, I was somewhat lucky, but also very strategic. Okay, I've got this thing that I have to solve to finish my degree, but I was able to diversify in the way. It was an experimental setup. There is a theoretical side to it, and also computational. So that means, there are 3 different legs to this solution that I was able to work on. In contrast, I had an office mate at the University of Rochester. His work was just theoretical, just mathematical. And he took probably 16 years to finish his PhD. He didn't give up. I give him kudos for that, but he was stuck. And he joined University of Rochester probably 5 years before I did. It finished several years after I left. So there is a thing to be taken from that. You sign up to do your PhD with the uncertainty that the problem that you've selected, or may not be the right problem at that time. So be aware of it and try to change and figure out how do you finish. Because the kudos is, if you've done your PhD, it's a signal to the world. Not only do you know how to start a project, but you also know how to finish. That is a signal to the world. So I would say, embrace it.
Thank you. Kevin.
I think the biggest challenge for me was writing my statement of purpose, because I was just writing out like all the projects that I worked on, and I was like, well, it's that impressive. But I think like at the end of the day, what they were looking for is kind of how you approach each project and sort of understanding how you think as an academic. And like my advice is to just really be proud of what you've done and figure out ways to link it to whatever degree you're chasing when you're writing your statement of purpose. And even if it like doesn't seem that impressive to you, as long as you can communicate how you think and what you're interested in, then I think you're gonna have a solid statement of purpose.
That's great. Thank you. Now we're going to open up to questions. So, who wants to be the first to ask our panelists a question or two? Over here. Who's that?
Hi, my name is
And introduce yourself and your year.
Okay, I'm a sophomore, and I this might not be the like most articulate, but I kind of know like this space isn't like known for being a place for like FGLI. Like there's not a lot of them there. Just I feel like a lot of like the costs and stuff that people were saying is like a big thing. But I guess how do you kind of like justify going into that? Like instead of like I guess the workforce or whatever, with like having family who's also like they're still low income and just like still wanting to like follow your passions and like contribute to your field, but also like is there any like guilt associated with that, or like I don't really know how to ask the question, but I hope that makes sense.
Who would like to answer the question?
I think I'll just say briefly what major are you?
Oh, I'm electrical engineering.
Electrical engineering. So you have a high potential earning.
Yeah. I feel like it's very like specific to like if I went into like an actual like corporate job instead of like going more into academia, which I feel like a lot of like the research thing I'm still like more interested in, but it's just like the choice of it is such like a differing, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
I think, and this might be a hot take, I don't know. When I was here as an undergrad, I would say this to people's face, like I will never fault a Christian person from choosing a job that pays well. You know, because like there are, like Evan was mentioning, there are like family considerations, like, and it could put you in a better position to work a little bit and then have a stronger safety net before you start doing a PhD. Like, you don't have to do it immediately, and sometimes it's actually better to wait before you start the PhD to get a bit more life experience instead of just going straight from undergrad to grad. Where I would fault someone who comes from a privileged background, like, why aren't you doing something else with your life when you have all of this safety net to actually make a difference? So I would say, like, it really, like, is a decision that is what makes the most sense for you. I was in a position, Javi and I talked about this, where, like, because I grew up so poor, 60K is like double what my family makes. So like I feel very comfortable, you know, and that is like another superpower. Like, you know how to make ends meet. You've been watching it happen your entire life, you know. And so like the precarity of a PhD definitely affects first-gen people more, but we are also better suited to take advantage of the opportunities, especially if you get into a place like Stanford or Harvard that has all of this money that you just have to like apply for, you know.
Anyone want to add to that, Evan?
I think for me, that was a big motivation of why I wanted to pursue industry first. Like I said, to kind of build that financial safety net, and then to also kind of figure out what I actually wanted to do with my career. And I think that going into industry, especially like with an electrical engineering major, can be pretty lucrative if you do that for maybe like 2 years. I don't like, for me, I stayed at home working fully remote, so I was able to save up a good bit of money and kind of create a savings account that could let me help my parents out with property tax over the next 2 years while I wait for my sister to like graduate and, you know, start paying for tuition. But it's kind of like just kind of looking at what resources you have, what you can kind of do to fill that financial gap for a little bit, and then actually pursuing what you're passionate about. You know? And I think, like, if anything, if you spend time in industry, professors will look at that very fondly because they're like, well, you're taking a massive pay cut, so you must be really interested in being a PhD student, you know. And like, what they're really interested in is having someone in their lab who's willing to like get down and dirty and do the work and really just contribute good publications to the field. And so if you show that you're like really passionate enough to take that big pay cut, you know, that helps your application.
That's great. Thank you. Next question. Yeah.
I have 2 questions. First, yes, I'm Anna. I graduated in JE class of 2024, and then I have been really educated in the last 2 years working at a nonprofit. I only recently started thinking that I would want to pivot into a PhD program, partly because I have some experience doing research. So I majored in sociology, which would be what I would go on to. So I think, Kevin, you're probably most closely aligned. So I have some research experience from my undergrad, but then the 2 years of nonprofit work, and now I'm trying to think, how do I become a competitive PhD applicant is one question. Maybe Kevin specifically, because the work that you're doing feels similar. And then a second question I have is, did you all apply to programs across the board, like anywhere in the US? Did anybody apply with specific like geographical constraints or any other things that kind of narrowed down what schools you applied to?
Who would like to answer that?
Yeah, I can answer your first question. I think for me, I took a look at my application and I was kind of like, well, I don't feel competitive enough either. So that was what motivated me to seek out a postdoc to work with while I was working in industry. And I think that works really well because it, one, shows that you're actually interested in conducting research, and two, it like gives you that boost on your resume for specific sociology programs that you may be interested in. So I think if you're interested in kind of making your application more competitive, a good way is is definitely to reach out to a professor to try to do research for them as a research assistant, or if they're too busy, reach out to a postdoc and see if they need any help in the lab.
And you did that outside of your like 9 to 5?
Yeah.
Unpaid?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I would also say because you're in New Haven, still try and renew connections with faculty, because you will need faculty letters of rec. And then for people who are still at Yale, right before this, I was meeting with a Black Studies professor here, and he was like, what advice are you going to give them? And then he shared this, and so I'm going to share it, that like, he will not write a letter for you if you, like bare minimum, you have to take a class with a professor if you're asking them in the humanities to write a letter for you. And so like, something that I wish I had known going in, like as an undergrad, be strategic about the classes that you're taking, and like the relationships that you're building with professors who can then go on to recommend you. This is where it is kind of like a big, like boys club, like who knows who, like the letter writers at Yale who wrote my letter were friends with the people at Stanford, like they like know each other, you know, and so like they like will be like, oh, you should like apply to this school because I like know this person. And so like that comes into play too. And it is really important to like foster those relationships with faculty.
Networking is always important. I mean, not just for PhDs, but into the job world, people you know, people you meet, especially Yale alumni who are worldwide, and not just Yale College alumni. Yale alumni are for everyone. And so when you move to a different city, feel free to contact Yale alumni at their local Yale Club and Association, which you can find on the Yale Alumni Association website, and get involved with local Yale clubs. First Gen Yale, we're a shared interest group. There are 70 of them. You can join all of them. Most of them are virtual. We have events also in various cities, regionally and nationwide. So just networking is really a key tool, a lifelong tool. And I was talking to Kevin earlier, most jobs people find are through networking. And now getting into PhD programs is networking. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah, in that vein, how would you recommend going about networking? So if I'm looking to do a PhD in a city that I've never been in or that I don't have a network in, how do you do that? How do you reach out to people when you don't feel like that's something that's been instilled in you to reach out? I'm Yelena, sorry, and I'm doing a master's in personalized medicine and applied engineering.
Well, there are data sets that can be accessed worldwide, especially in medicine. And so what I would do is if there's a program that you like in a specific city or region or institute, contact postdocs and grad students in those labs, because the professors, it's sometimes hard to get through to them. I'm not saying don't email professors, but it's easier to get through to a grad student or a postdoc in the lab that you like. If you propose like some collaborative work, you can do it remotely because there's data sets that you can access. So I would just start reaching out and make a plan for certain projects that you would want to work on with these professors. A useful tip for finding out what professors you're interested in is read their most recent publications. The last paragraph in the discussion is literally what they want to work on. So you can literally just hack this and like they're literally telling you like this is what we're currently moving towards, or here's the future of this type of work, and you'll be there perfectly ready to propose that exact idea back to them, as long as it's something that you're already thinking of and interested in, because presumably if you're looking at a professor, you're interested in the work that they're doing and interested in the future directions.
Okay. Take this from a guy who's working on mRNA. Hot topic right now.
Hot topic.
Kevin?
Just
Yeah.
a quick thing. I used LinkedIn a lot, so like searching up PhD in like blank at blank university, and you can also use professors' lab websites to find PhD students that are part of their group. So that's really useful for getting like their emails. Just shooting a quick brief one, like I'm interested in this. Would you like to talk for 15 minutes?
Okay.
And if you want to use the Yale network, cross campus has over 8,000, maybe more than by now, alumni and students who are in there. And if you want to find particular people in particular fields or industries or locations, you can do a search and contact them directly through cross campus. Next question. Yeah.
This is for Lydia specifically. I was wondering if you could talk, my name is Matthias, also I'm senior Econ and Humanities in JE as well. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about like how you think your application changed in that year, and like what decisions you made that kind of, allowed you to go from not getting into the places you wanted to getting into Stanford and with like a scholarship as prestigious as the one you got as well.
Yeah, so I would say like the fellowship part, just to answer that quickly, it's a very different kind of application than like the personal statement for the PhD program. So like the Knight Intimacy Fellowship is wanting to know about you as a person, where the PhD personal statement is wanting to know about you as a scholar, like your research. And so like really differentiating that. I think a big difference between the first time and the second time I applied, I did a lot of groundwork with talking to grad students and leveraging like relationships with people. Was very lucky that some people shared their personal statements with me.
There's like a huge curriculum to like how you're writing these things that I didn't know the first time. Like, for example, I am a 20th century Americanist. Sometimes I'll look at post-45 literature. These are all terms in like English as a field that I did not use in my first application. But like in my second one, I was using the terms that the broader field is using to describe the kind of work that I wanted to do. And I think another big difference was actually my writing sample. So like if you're doing a senior thesis, like you're already on the right track. If you are not at the senior thesis point yet, I did not. It harmed me because I didn't have this body of writing to pull from for my writing sample. And so English writing sample or humanities more generally, make sure that your writing sample shows that you're engaging with secondary sources. So like a typical Yale English paper might be top out at 10 pages and might just be you doing like a close reading. The move to like being an academic, a scholar, you're positioning your close reading in a broader scholarly conversation. So make sure that your personal statement and your writing sample both indicate that you're aware of the conversation and that you're citing people. So having that like lit review secondary source section.
Very interesting. Thank you. Yeah, and your name and class. Hi, I'm Gosta. I'm a junior and I'm majoring in sociology and statistics and data science. My question is, how did you manage like studying for the GRE, doing your thesis, and then also applying at the same time? Did everybody hear the question?
Yeah. I was lucky. COVID already I did not take that GRE.
I mean, I took it when I had a 9 to 5, which is arguably easier than being a part student. But I think the way I thought about it is like, okay, so if I want to apply in the fall, right, I need to take the GRE sometime January, February, March. Just like take it early, and if my score is like good enough, great. If it's not, schools are never gonna know. Because GRE is pretty optional at a lot of schools. You do want to check the requirements of the schools first, though. So yeah, you want to get GRE out of the way as early as you can, and then you also want to start writing your like statement of purpose. You want to start networking like very early on, and kind of like Lydia was saying, you want to lay the groundwork for when you submit your application.
Make an outline for your personal statements and like kind of the approach you're going to take of what kind of scholar you're going to present yourself as. And I would just send it out to trusted colleagues, like even at your level, or if you in grad students, send it over to them. And then while you're seeking feedback, you can like kind of like get that out to them and then study for the GRE if you need the GRE. When I applied, it was not required, so I didn't have to balance that. But I would say try to get feedback as early as possible and as much feedback as you can, especially from people who have already gotten it.
You said you're a junior. Yeah, I would start working on it this summer, so that you can have like a head start. So it'll be due in the fall around the same time that all of your like fall finals are due, because the application is due sometime in December.
You don't need a finished product to get it to the trusted colleagues. Just like give a rough outline with the few things that you want to talk about, and then they can give you feedback on what is maybe missing. But someone in your specific field.
It's a really good point about resources and going to get help early and often.
Yeah, the core-based center can also help. They help you with fancy.
And so I'm glad you both are bringing it up, because often for first-gen low-income students and alumni, we're used to doing everything ourselves. We don't get help, we don't ask, we just do it. And what we learned by being at Yale and other schools and now the PhD process, actually asking for help is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. So don't let that negative mindset interfere with, oh, I can do this myself. But as everyone's saying, get help. There are resources there. There are people who want to help. There are postdocs, there are PhD students, there are faculty who really want to help you. You need to take the initiative, because they don't know that you're looking, but do it and do it often, because that will give you, as everyone has said, a leg up and a heads up. So just keep that positive mindset going. That getting help is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness.
Every step of the way, even after you get accepted to a program, you should still be doing this as early as possible.
I mean, I just met with that Yale faculty member because he's helping me think about how to apply to academic classes.
And my thank you notes. When you see someone, thank them. Keep your friendships going, because you're actually creating your own personal board of directors. And these people that are with you through being a student and beyond, they're there for life for you. And you'll be able to contact them throughout your careers and where you go and end up. So I just want to say thank you for that. We're at the close of our time. It's 1:00, but our panelists are welcome to stay. You're welcome to stay. You're welcome to get more food. And we'd like to continue the conversation for people who would like to stay around. So I would just like to turn, any more questions right now from anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
Just quickly, did anybody apply with geographical constrictions or anything?
So Javi and I are fiancés.
We're engaged.
Yeah, congratulations. Congratulations.
Yes, and we applied tough. Bay Area, Northeast only. I did not get any offers in the Bay Area. I did not get any offers in the Northeast. And so Boston, I'm in California.
And we've been doing it for 4 years.
Wow.
The long distance, so you could do it.
What I did was I looked at all the professors that I wanted to work with, and then the schools that they happened to be at. So it was less a product of like schools and geographic, and more like whose lab do I want to work in? Whose professor's research do I vibe with more? Because at the end of the day, you're going to be working with that professor for 5 years.
Yeah. There's a lot of young professors now who are really putting in the hard work for recruiting FGLI and making space for identity. And like you could see like some rockstar professors who are running mentorship programs at their institutions. Like it's a different generation for the young professors.
And just to say, like, it typically is taboo to apply to the institution that you're at for undergrad or grad school. Like I know some people who are doing their grad here who did undergrad here, but typically you should consider applying elsewhere, that it will probably be a no, unless there's a really good reason that it should be against. Can I ask why that is?
It's like incestuous. They feel like they want to get.
No,
honestly, like, they want like.
But it's good that I have the West Coast.
They want novel ideas, and like I went to University of California for undergrad, totally 100% different from Ivy League school. My God, it couldn't be any more different. And like getting the strength of having like the East Coast, West Coast, or Midwest, or private versus public, all of these things make you a stronger scholar. So if you can go to another region, it makes you way more desirable if you're academia or anything else. So
it's also a networking thing, because there's like an academic network of people who work on the same things, and so you want to like be able to work with different professors, so that when you're going for like an academic or industry job, you can have two people who can speak to your ability as a student.
Okay. But you're here as a master's student. It's not quite the same if it's not undergrad. So you could apply and be candidate for PhD here with the master's. And Javi had like a temporary fellowship, like a 1 year.
Yeah, I had an NSF fellowship between my undergrad and grad school.
At Yale.
Any more questions? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So if like for the 1 year.
And identify yourself.
I'm William, a junior major in MCEV. So like my question would be like for the postdoc 1 year fellowship, what's like the application process to get the fellowship? That's all.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I had. I had an NSF postbac, but that I was able to take anywhere I wanted to. So I was either going to go to UCSF or to Yale, and I chose Yale over UCSF. And for that program, it's been so long. It's 2013 when I applied for it. So 2013 when I applied for it. Yeah, I took the same strategy of there is like a research statement that you're gonna make, and in that research statement, like there should be pertinent things about your background in there. I didn't shy away from that. I did 30% of the beginning of it, but then that other 70% was a lot of like, hey, my advisor at UC Santa Cruz is talking to or working with professors at UCSF and at Berkeley. And I'm the bridge on the nexus between that. I mean, there was a small little project that I came up with. Make sure that if you are if you have the opportunity now to pitch like an original project that you came up with, make that very clear. Even if you haven't started ordering the reagents for it, like make it clear that you've already thought about like the aims or the project directions, because they really want to see that you are budding out independently from the project that you entered. Are you in research or no?
Well, I was in research for the past 2 years, but there's some issues and it's so complicated. But like basically, I will be doing research this summer. So.
Okay. Whatever lab you end up in the summer, just make sure that like when you land there, you're going to be working on a grad student's or postdoc's project. Make sure to talk to them early on about budding out your own ideas. They'll never say no, but they might say, okay, well, spend 90% of your time working on this and 10% of your time on that. And then that project will be what you want to forefront because you're showing that you're thinking independently and that you're not just lap hands for somebody else. So I think that's the thing that helped me get the NSF fellowship was the project that I proposed was my own project idea. And I was already bridging like universities to work on that project.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Hi, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm doing research in the sociology department. So like, how would I describe that for like a fellowship? Like, how's that different to like, I don't know, because it's like I'm working with grad students and helping them with their dissertations and like whatever research they're doing, and it's like really hard to like give my ideas because it's like their work, it's like what they want to publish and what they want to put out. How would I talk about the research I'm doing for like these fellowships?
Well, so it shouldn't be radically different from what they're doing. It should just be kind of like a branch off of what they're currently working on or what you're helping them with. And so talk to them first. Be like, hey, I've been thinking about this, and there's a professor at Harvard or a professor somewhere else who's doing something like this. Is it okay if I kind of contact them and try to bridge that and reassure them that you're going to continue doing this hard work that you're doing with them? But that you do want to kind of branch out a little bit. Any good mentor will never tell you no.
That's great.
If I may just add one thing,
Yes,
by the way, since you're in sociology, I'm pushing for interdisciplinary work. So talk to a philosophy professor maybe who would be interested in what you are doing. So find something that is unique that you bring to the table, building on the work that you're doing for the graduate student. I think there would be another way of making something that is yours. So think about the interdisciplinary philosophy, economics, whatever else that you're interested in.
And look at like what funding Yale has available to you. Because like I know like PASCUS funding might be coming up for like the PASCUS knowledge box that you could do senior year. Or if you're thinking about like the senior thesis, what that would cover, you could like maybe think of this as kind of like intersecting, and then your little like chunk of that story could emerge. And having Yale has so much funding that like you kind of lose access to once you graduate. So like just seeing what like funding is available and if you can make your project fit, or if there is work that like if you need like IRB funding.
Great place to go is the Office of Fellowships and Funding. That is the funding grant office that's not just including the post-grad programs through roads and Marshall and things like that, but also funding for exactly what you're talking about. And they have lots of money. They'd love to have applications like from you and from others. And students just aren't aware of it. So it's the Office of Fellowships and Funding. You can check it out on the website. You can go make an appointment and go speak with Emma Rose, who's the head, and there's other staff members there as well who can help for exactly what you're looking for. And it can direct you and give you deadlines and timetables. Also review your applications for you. Often they have to make a recommendation for students when they apply, so they can help you with that too.
And build it with your grad student or with your postdoc or even with the professor. Have conversations with them, like bring them outlines and have them help you with the logic, but you're not building it alone.
Let me ask for a final question for you all. What wish you had known? Looking back, Kevin, looking back not too long ago, what do you wish you had known when you were at Yale, for the students in the room? For those who have graduated, looking back, where are you now? What kinds of things for you, now that you're out, looking back, what you could have done, Kevin as an alum in the same situation as Anna, what would you have done differently? Like what looking back is like the spotlight and you kind of wish you kind of had known? You alluded to it a little bit, Lydia, but what would others think? And please elaborate as well. What advice do you give?
When I started, the tradition was, yes, you do a PhD, either go into industry or academia, but looking back, I would say, had I known that it is not a career track that you're interested in, you are actually building a launch pad or a platform. Options so open, if you keep yourself open-minded. That would be the way I would say, don't stress out too much. If you do good work and build a platform that has some relevance to the real world, opportunities will come or you will figure things out. That takes the stress out and just be open to that.
I mean, I think for me, I did a lot of extracurriculars while I was here as an undergrad, and I kind of wish I focused a little bit more on classes and research. Because at the end of the day, right, these PhD programs want to see that you have good research backgrounds and that you can actually conduct research. Would I change anything? No. But I do think that it is worth kind of taking your courses seriously, because even though you may not use them, you may not study that in the future, there might be some techniques or methods that are applicable to your future research as a PhD student.
Right. Xavier.
So I feel very lucky to have shed any feeling of imposter syndrome very, very early. So even before I transferred from community college, I was already kind of like, this is stupid. I'm not going to feel this anymore. And I decided to not feel it. And it's because there's a lot of things that are systemically wrong in academia that I did not agree to and that I did not sign up for. And so I refused to be a victim to it or refused to sort of be held back because of it. And I kind of wish I shed it a little, maybe 1 or 2 years earlier in community college, but otherwise I feel like I shed that feeling early on. So I have a non-canonical view of imposter syndrome, and I've given talks here at Yale about it. And if you're interested, you can email me about it. I'm happy to talk to you about it, but that's the only thing. I wish I could cut a year or two off of that imposter syndrome.
I think some of the practical stuff that I've already shared, being strategic about what classes you take. For me, I didn't know the difference between tenure track versus non-tenure track professors. So we want to look for people who are assistant, associate, or professor attached to their name. Lecturers don't have this as the same standing that those tenure track faculty do. I wish I had done a senior thesis at Yale because I think it would have helped me make my application and develop my thinking in that way. And I think in addition to that advice that I'm giving now, another one, apply to the Mellon Fellowship. You apply in your junior year, I think, if you're considering the humanities. And that's just a scholarship that is aimed to help undergrads apply to graduate school. Those are really specific things that I I just didn't know because I didn't know, right? Like it took me a very long time to figure out how this place works coming from rural Texas. And so like I say that, and then I also say like, it's okay to not have it all figured out, and it's okay to not take advantage of all the opportunities. There's this like saying that I saw in a movie that really stuck with me that I think becomes more and more true the longer like you have access to like these super resource rich spaces. Being first gen, growing up in poverty, you are used to not having opportunity and to feeling like you have to take advantage of everything. And we're now moving into a position that Yale has opened up for us, where there are so many opportunities that some of them you don't take. And I think that was kind of like a brain shift that like, I'm only one person. I literally can't do it all. And I really should not be beating myself up for the fact that it took me so long to figure out how to succeed here. And that, yeah, I could have talked to more tenured faculty, or yeah, I could have done all this stuff, but I didn't, and I'm still in the position that I'm in. So sharing the knowledge, but also like recognize that you know like what you can handle, and like that you all have your own like positionalities and things that you're juggling. And it's okay also to feel imposter syndrome. Like we all have to figure out what that journey is for us. And for me, for having it was like rejecting it completely, like this is your problem. For me, it's like, well, this is actually like a strength of mine in these spaces. That actually, how much more impressive is it that I'm sitting at the table with you when you had so many more opportunities than I did, you know, stuff like that.
Well, thank you. What a wonderful way to end our discussion. So I want to thank the panelists. So thank the panelists for joining. I want to thank again Whitehall on the Office of Educational Opportunity, and it's my honor and privilege from First Gen Yale to host something like this. I think we've all learned a lot.